This is an open vehicle. Drive carefully. No.
Don't worry, your insurance will cover it.
Not mine. Yours.
There are car lines which have lasted for many years, even decades, and deservedly so, as upgrades over the years show continuous improvement and in turn loyalty by its fans. And there are other cars which live very short lifespans, but again deservedly so, as they were serious miscalculations as to what the public perception would be. And then there are cars which have their futures cut short, but less deservedly so. Some cost their companies too much, some were simply ahead of their time, some had a potential audience that was too small, and still others could have succeeded if just a few changes were made, but were never given the chance. But one thing all these cars have in common is that none of them got a comparable replacement, at least not right away.
Alright, the next intersection, hang a left. Turn left up here. Okay, now left at the next.
Here are my picks for the top 20 cars that died too soon. This is my old car.
Left right here. Go left on Elm. Hang a left. Do you think I can make a right? Why would you want to do that?
For my US-based viewers, if you are looking to sell your old car or searching for that special old car you once had, check out the My Old Car Exchange. Go to myoldcar.loma.tech and sign up today. I've included this link in the description below. A big thank you to Loma for creating and managing this site. Number 20, Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution. Also known simply as the Evo, the Lancer Evolution was the last car Mitsubishi offered, at least in the US market, that appealed to enthusiasts. Originally introduced in 1992 as just a Japanese market car, there were enough gray market imports occurring that Mitsubishi officially exported the Evo to Europe in 1998 and to the US in 2003, at the start of its 8th generation. The move to the US was prompted by the unexpected success of the Subaru WRX, which also started with a more traditional compact, the Impreza, but gained a loyal following with the option for a more powerful engine. Although previous generations of the Evo typically only lasted 2 to 3 years each, the Evo 10, which began in 2007, would run for 10 years. Few changes were made during this generation up until its final year of 2016, as Mitsubishi concentrated its efforts on more practical cars, like the Outlander SUV and Mirage subcompact.
And you should thank your lucky stars you get that cup holder.
The non-Evo Lancer would only live on for one more year, and Mitsubishi hasn't offered another performance car since. Number 19, Mazda RX-7. So if you're not from the US, you may question why I included this one on my list, since the RX-7, which entered its run in most of the world in 2002, had an immediate replacement, the RX-8. But in the US, there was an 8-year gap between the two, as US sold RX-7s ended in 1995.
Voted Best New Performance Car of 1992.
Although in some markets the RX-7 had a small rear seat, it was always sold as a two-seater in the US during its 3 generations, and only having 2 seats of course meant higher insurance premiums. The RX-7 was one of several models from Mazda, which were powered by a rotary engine, a design that was touted as more simple and reliable, as it had less moving parts than a conventional cylinder-based internal combustion engine. However, it never gained industry-wide acceptance, due to its propensity to let too much fuel burn on its way out of the tailpipe. Had there not been so many similar competitors in the 1990s, battling for a shrinking market base, the RX-7 could have lived on. And although the RX-8, which started in 2003, remedied the 2-seater issue by offering a back seat and small rear doors to access it, its inefficient rotary engine killed it for good by 2012.
Say, aren't you the driver of this new RX-7? Hi.
Hi.
Number 18, Nissan Xterra. Here's an example of a truck which wasn't ahead of its time, but instead maybe arrived too late. The market for rugged outdoor-focused SUVs in the US grew during the 1970s, with smaller models like the Jeep Wrangler and big trucks like the K5 Blazer. But after an influx of SUV options from Japan peaked in the 1980s, Nissan was late to the game when they introduced the rugged Xterra in 1999. Unlike most of the other outdoor-focused SUVs, the Xterra didn't offer the option to drop its top, but instead offered better options for rooftop storage, and of course, big gray plastic bumpers, a growing trend of the 2000s. Although it earned Motor Trend's SUV of the Year award in 2000 and 2006, Nissan let its second generation that began in 2005 continue relatively unchanged for 10 years, and was ultimately a victim of Nissan being forced to leave niche markets, such as this one, behind. Number 17, Chevy Avalanche.
Change for $1. Sure.
Although the Avalanche had a rough start in terms of styling when it debuted in 2001, as it fell victim to GM's obsession of the time with cheap gray plastic cladding. Inside it had a clever feature called the midgate.
Thanks.
which increased the size of the pickup bed by extending it into the cab. Built on the full-size Suburban platform, it combined the advantages of a pickup and SUV. By its second generation, the body cladding was gone, and shared a common look with the more conventional Silverado pickup. It even spawned a rebadged version for Cadillac, the Escalade EXT, which although sold far less than the Chevy, it fit in well with Cadillac's in-your-face angular styling of the time. Although GM also tried offering the midgate in the GMC Envoy XUV and the Hummer H2 SUT, it never caught on like they hoped, and Chevy moved their attention elsewhere as the Avalanche sales sunk by nearly 80% in 2010 from its peak in 2003, leading to its cancellation in 2013. Although the midgate didn't end for good, as it is currently back in their Silverado EV, which even has the same flying buttresses on the side, making me wonder why they didn't bring the Avalanche name back. Number 16, Pontiac Fiero. When it launched in 1984, the Fiero was Pontiac's first mid-engine two-seat sports car, and it was a huge hit, built with then-revolutionary space-age construction and plastic body panels. But under the rear engine panel sat GM's far from sporty Iron Duke four-cylinder, as Pontiac was under pressure to not only provide a fuel-efficient commuter car, but also not offer anything that could come close to competing with the Chevy Corvette, which began its fourth generation that same year. Although over 136,000 were sold in its first year, its poor performance, not to mention the Duke's propensity to catch fire, led to enough complaints that Pontiac offered a V6 for 1985, with a horsepower bump of nearly 50%. Despite improvements in the styling, and despite sales by 1987 being down two-thirds from its inaugural year, a redesign for 1988 had improvements to the suspension, brakes, steering, and both the four-cylinder and V6 engines. Updates that many of the original designers wanted in 1984, but instead, GM killed it when sales didn't improve, despite it being the best Fiero up to that point, and the only ones that are worth much today.
Are you insane? We can't afford a Ferrari.
It's a Fiero.
Ferrari, Fiero, same thing.
Number 15, Buick Regal.
I thought you bought a Buick.
This is a Buick, Grandma.
That's no Buick.
That's what I told him.
The Regal marks the last traditional car that Buick sold, at least in the U.S. market, starting in 1973 as yet another large coupe shared with other GM models.
It retails for $4,960.52.
It would evolve in its second generation as a formidable sport coupe when the Grand National trim debuted in 1982, lasting until 1987's G and X. But then GM decided Buick needed to transition from a performance car brand to a family car brand, and although some mildly sporty models would be offered, it blended into the background until its first cancellation in 2004. But Buick decided to try again in 2011, this time with a platform shared with Opel in Germany. The result was a smaller sporty sedan that tried to decrease Buick's average buyer age. Another revision in 2018, shared with Holden in Australia, changed the sedan into a four-door hatchback, and a four-door Regal Tour X wagon was introduced, the first Regal wagon since 1983. The hatchback and wagon provided nearly the same utility as their taller crossovers, but Buick didn't promote them nearly as well. Once GM sold their Opel and Holden divisions, the Regal's fate was set.
Can we slow down? I'm trying to watch the game.
Okay, hit the Brembo brakes.
Number 14, Cadillac ELR.
You work hard, you create your own luck, and you gotta believe anything is possible.
Some of you may think this short-lived gas-electric hybrid is more appropriate on a list of expensive sales flops, rather than a list of cars that ended too soon. But I think it could be on both. The ELR only lasted 2 model years, and those 2 years were not even consecutive, as sales were so slow for its first model year of 2014 that Cadillac suspended production for a year to sell what was already built, before bringing it back for 2016. The ELR, which started as the Converge concept, used a platform that was similar to the Chevy Volt. It had a single electric motor powering the front wheels, and a 4-cylinder gas engine that would generate electricity when the battery was depleted. Although the Volt was a 5-door hatchback, which offered easy entry for passengers and cargo, the ELR only had 2 doors and a standard trunk opening, and a starting price of over $75,000 US, and could easily pass $80,000 with options. For a car that only had 217 horsepower, it was a hard sell, even with a price drop to $58,000 and making formerly extra cost options standard for 2016. Production ended after less than 3,000 were sold, but had this car offered more utility and easier entry and exit and a more reasonable price, I believe it would not have ended so soon.
That was easy.
Number 13, Toyota Supra. Although this car has been canceled twice, with the most recent coming up in March of 2026, the Supra is on this list because of its first cancellation from the US market in 1998. starting as a longer inline 6-cylinder engine variant of the 4-cylinder Toyota Celica in 1978. It shared the Celica platform until 1985, after which Toyota split the Celica and Supra into two distinct models. Whereas the Celica switched to front-wheel drive and was marketed more as an affordable, sporty economy car, the Supra kept the previous generation's rear-wheel drive and transitioned to their sole performance car offering, with a turbocharger added for 1987. But it was the 4th-gen Supra that began in 1993, where Toyota started offering serious performance options, including twin turbochargers and a more aluminum in the body structure to reduce weight. But as sports car sales dipped in the 90s, too many competitors forced Toyota to stop imports to Canada in 1996, and the US 2 years later. Today, 4th-gen unmodified Supras, with a twin turbo, can sell for well over $100,000 US, far more than the BMW designed Supras that began in 2019 and will end in 2026. Number 12. Honda S2000. Continuing a tradition Honda started in the 1960s by beginning the names of their roadsters with the letter S, Honda introduced what would be its last roadster for the US market, the S2000, in 1999. With the 2000 representing the 2-liter engine displacement, it had 124 horsepower per liter. For a naturally aspirated engine, the S2000 held the record up through 2010 as having the most horsepower per liter of any car in the market. The designers and engineers built the car as they wanted it, and not succumbing to marketing or executive pressures, resulting in a performance roadster the likes of which Honda had never done before or since. Being a roadster meant sales would be limited, but decent at over 17,000 in its first year of 1999. But sales dropped each year after that, although not enough to prevent a second-gen model beginning in 2004. However, for 2006, sales dropped below 10,000, and with the approaching global recession, sales never recovered, leading to less than 1,300 sold in its final year of 2009. Had the market not crashed, the S2000 likely would have lasted beyond 2010. Most S2000s today can sell for about the same as when they were new, which is a testament to their unwavering popularity. Number 11. Ford Focus ST and RS.
You can't touch this. You can't touch this.
Although the Ford Focus ST was offered in Europe as far back as the 2005 model year, it would take until late 2012 for the US market to get this more potent version of the subcompact that first arrived in economy car form in 2000. The US spec ST was offered in the Focus's 3rd generation, when Ford began to consolidate its worldwide operations to have the same platform shared between US and other world markets.
Car! Make me a sandwich!
Although the base Focus's 2-liter 4-cylinder could produce 160 horsepower.
Car! Club sandwich! Easy on the mayo.
The ST, which could only be had with a 6-speed manual, added a turbocharger that boosted the horsepower to 252, which was 25 more than the last ST offered in Europe.
This car really turbocharged? Turbocharged, and it has great gas mileage.
Then in 2015, the Focus RS was revealed in Geneva and went on sale in the US and Canada for 2016. Its 2.3-liter Turbo 4 could make 350 horsepower and was the only Focus to offer all-wheel drive. Although around 13,000 RS models were sold in the US and Canada between 2016 and 2018, only 1,500 were offered there in its final year. Both the ST and RS died when Ford pulled the Focus from North America at the end of 2018 as part of Ford's unfortunate decision to concentrate on trucks and SUVs starting in 2021. Number 10. Pontiac G8. Here's another example of a car that simply arrived too late, and considering its circumstances, it's a wonder it ever got created at all. The G8 was Pontiac's second model that rebadged a car from GM's Australian subsidiary Holden, with the first being the GTO that ended in 2006. The G8 started as a 2008 model and was effectively replacing the Grand Prix that ended that same year, although the G8 was rear-wheel drive, unlike the Grand Prix's front-wheel drive. Although the base G8 had a 256 horsepower 3.6-liter V6, the G8 GT had a 6-liter V8. Both of those models had a 6-speed automatic, but Pontiac also offered the G8 GXP with a 5-speed manual attached to a 6.2-liter V8 that made 415 horsepower. The GXP would have the lowest production of any G8, with only 1,829 ever built, although an additional 11,000 G8s remained unsold by the end of 2008. Much of that disinterest was probably due to the not-so-secret rumor that GM was going to be ending the Pontiac brand as part of its bankruptcy. Deep price cuts helped sell more models, with over 30,000 sold by the time the G8 was canceled in July of 2009, along with every other Pontiac model. Number 9. Cadillac CT6-V.
Blackwing.
No, not Blackwing. Just the engine is called Blackwing.
Blackwing.
Here's an example of a car that had multiple things going against it, which made it inevitable that it wouldn't last long. The Cadillac brand used to be synonymous with big sedans, and the XTS, which preceded the CT6, had a pretty decent following with Cadillac's more traditional clientele. The CT6 was originally sold alongside the XTS, but not surprisingly, they couldn't support two similar models for long. The CT6 was introduced as a rear-drive sedan, which hurt its chances in northern climates, although for extra money you could get all-wheel drive. Second thing against it, it was a sedan, which by the mid-2010s was losing ground to crossovers and SUVs. Then Cadillac offered one more option, which improved it significantly, and that was to offer their high-performance V trim for the CT6 in 2019, with a 550 horsepower 4.2-liter twin-turbo V8. But with most of its previous buyers being older and less interested in performance, the CT6-V hit its biggest disadvantage, that being a very small buyer pool. Although I don't know this for sure, I suspect they were already considering the cancellation of the CT6 and wanted to offer a few special editions before that happened. The end result was only 915 CT6Vs ever made over 2 model years.
And this has the thing where you stick your foot under it and it opens the boot. A lot of cars have that, but it never seems to work.
Ending when the entire CT6 lineup was dropped in 2020.
Yes! Oh my god. Yes!
Number 8, Dodge Magnum.
Yeah, Mr. Spooky. That's a joke. Seriously.
This one may be a controversial choice for a car that ended too soon, as I know there are many out there who think the Dodge Magnum resembled a hearse, especially when it was painted black. I think the concept was worth a try, but it was a relatively brave choice to make, considering how much the wagon market had shrunk by the mid-2000s. The Magnum was treated as a replacement for the Dodge Intrepid sedan that ended in 2004, even though the Magnum was a wagon, and it was rear-wheel drive. But if Dodge was your preferred brand, and if you wanted a sedan, the Magnum was the closest option available. Wagons have proven consistently that they have just about as much utility as most so-called sport utility vehicles.
Dodge Magnum. Snow? In the bayou?
Offering rear-wheel drive meant the Magnum could be more performance-focused, with the top end offering a 6.1-liter Hemi V8. But when Dodge offered the Charger sedan in 2006, Dodge loyalists now had a choice. And although the Magnum was the more practical choice, the Charger was quick to take sales from the Magnum. However, I suspect the biggest reason for the Magnum's demise was the recession that began in 2008 and Chrysler's upcoming bankruptcy, and it was a good excuse for Dodge and Chrysler to thin out their offerings. But as Dodge's last wagon, it was a choice I think more should have considered. Number 7, Chevy Volt.
A car that can go up to 40 miles before it uses any gas at all. That's an American revolution.
The Volt shared the same platform as an earlier entry in this list, the Cadillac ELR, but sold far better, lasting 10 years across 2 generations. It was GM's first EV with a range extender in the form of 1.4-liter 4-cylinder gasoline engine, and as of this writing in 2025, it may be the last, and GM still does not offer any kind of hybrid powertrain for the US market. Starting in 2010, the Volt shared a platform with the then-new Chevy Cruze, and as such, unlike typical EVs today, where the battery pack occupies the entire space under the floor, the Volt's battery extended between the front and rear seats, which limited it to being only a 4-seater. The Volt was one of the most expensive cars that GM had ever developed, with some estimates putting the cost at over $1.2 billion US. So early on, it was a certainty that GM lost money on each car sold. But after 10 years, maybe they finally started making a profit, or at least maybe they did if they sold enough of them. Although the range extender should have made it more popular than an all-electric car, EVs were much more of a niche market during the Volt's run as compared to today, and concerns about battery replacement and long-term purchases weighed heavily on buyers. But the biggest issue the Volt had was that it wasn't shaped like a more popular crossover, and instead it had a just as practical hatchback, which for reasons I don't understand, no one seems to want anymore. Number 6, Volvo C70.
There's more to life than a Volvo. There's the freedom to change your mind, and to change it back again.
The episode just before this one was my first episode about a Volvo, the 240, which was considered to be the safest car Volvo ever produced when it first went on sale in 1974. Much of that safety was due to its square shape, and roof pillars that could easily support the weight of multiple cars, which makes it all the more amazing to me that Volvo would ever offer a convertible. But they did just that when the C70 was first introduced in 1996 as a 1997 model, as it offered both a coupe and a soft-top convertible. And it wasn't all that square, with a more rounded shape that fit in better with the 90s compared to their older boxy designs. But when the second gen started in 2006, it was only available with a retractable hardtop, a feature that was becoming more popular in the 2000s, as it offered the feel of a hardtop coupe when the top was up. The Volvo design was one of the most complex in the business, as the top split into 3 sections when they were all stored in the trunk. A trunk which, by the way, had almost no space left in it when the top was stowed. A drawback which is the primary reason the hardtop convertible fad waned during the course of the 2000s and 2010s. And yet, I think it still ended too soon, as just watching the top fold like origami was the coolest part. Number 5. Chevy SS. Like the Pontiac G8 that was earlier in this list, the Chevy SS was built in Australia and shared a platform with the Holden Commodore. When it arrived in U.S. showrooms in 2013, Chevrolet also sold the Malibu and Impala sedans, with the latter being about the same size as the SS. In fact, it was not uncommon for uneducated buyers to assume the SS was just a variation of the Impala, but they were entirely different cars, and unlike the Impala, which was often shown in TV advertising, the SS was nearly invisible in the same media. Unlike the G8, which offered both V6 and V8 engines that ranged in horsepower from 256 to 415, the SS only offered the 415 horsepower V8. Initial deliveries in 2013 targeted dealerships with higher than average sales of the Corvette and Camaro, thinking they would more likely have the target audience for the SS. Although Chevrolet originally touted they could sell over 15,000 units per year, the actual numbers were much lower, although those numbers went up each year, from 2,479 in 2014 to 4,055 in 2017. That last year was also the final year for the Holden Commodore, which led to the SS being canceled as well. Considering the sales numbers were increasing, I believe they could have climbed more had the production been allowed to continue. Number 4. BMW i8.
How long until Hendricks can launch a missile? Less than 30 seconds!
So yes, this one may seem a bit too new for a channel called My Old Car, but as of this writing, the i8 first went up for sale over 11 years ago in 2014, even though it looks more modern than that. The i8 was a gas-electric hybrid, although not like the Volt and ELR featured earlier, in which the gas engine recharged the battery. The i8 had a 1.5-liter turbo 3-cylinder engine that was paired with a 98 kilowatt electric motor, making a combined 369 horsepower. The battery could be plugged in, which allowed the i8 to run for about 20 miles on battery power only. Initially only offered as a coupe with a small back seat, a convertible version with no back seat debuted in 2019. Both the coupe and convertible had butterfly doors, adding to the supercar look, but its relatively low horsepower rating for what looked like a supercar seriously hurt its image and impacted sales. Pricing made it a tough sell as well, with prices starting in the US at nearly $136,000, resulting in less than 7,000 sold in the US over its entire 7-year run that ended in 2020. This is probably the only car on this list where ending too soon had a significant benefit. Prices for used i8s are far lower than when new, some even below $40,000, meaning those who couldn't afford them when new have a much better chance of affording one now. Number 3. Dodge Viper.
If this doesn't excite you, check your pulse, because you're not well today. This is Viper.
With a production run that spanned 25 years, across 3 generations, or 5 depending on who you ask, the Viper was the most extreme sports car Dodge ever offered. Initially available only as a roadster that had no retractable roof and no side windows, it would later get real windows, a proper folding top, or the option of a fully enclosed coupe. It was Dodge's first car with a V10 engine, and Dodge was still selling square K-car based relics like the Dynasty. The V10 initially could make 400 horsepower, and was also offered in the short-lived Dodge Ram SRT-10 pickup, but reached 645 horsepower by the last version of the Viper in 2017. The 25-year span wasn't continuous production, as it went on hiatus for 2008, and also from 2011 to 2012. That last break led to rumors of its demise, but the Viper came back for a final run in 2013, where it was rebadged the SRT Viper, and looked more like the Batmobile than a production car. It returned to being branded as a Dodge in 2015, as the change in name was hurting sales more than helping. This final generation was the lowest selling, with only around 2,400 sold during its final 5 years. Although low sales definitely played a factor, it also would have required a redesign to comply with side airbag regulations, something that Dodge simply wasn't going to do for such a low-volume car.
We're going to need more valets.
Number 2. Dodge Charger and Challenger. I combined these two since they not only shared a common platform underneath, but they both ended their production runs at the same time, in December of 2023. The 4-door Charger began in 2006, and the 2-door Challenger 2 years later, that latter being Dodge's first direct competitor with the Chevy Camaro and Ford Mustang. Both the Charger and Challenger continued with the same basic design for over a decade, simply because they could, as they continue to offer more and more extreme high-performance V8 editions, while still also offering cheaper and slower V6 models. The Challenger would go the craziest, with the Demon Dragster in 2018, topping 800 horsepower.
Look at that! That goes in the back of its eye!
But by 2021, parent company Stellantis announced both models would end in 2023, as they transitioned to EV versions, and the Hemi engines would be retired. To no one's surprise, the public response to that announcement wasn't exactly positive. The Challenger name was also retired, and the Charger name was put on a new 2-door EV that showed up later in 2024. Although the power output for the Charger EV was comparable to the former Hemi engines, few were impressed when they offered fake engine revs piped through external speakers to make it sound like the old Hemi V8. The backlash was so extreme that Dodge moved up its timetable to bring back gas-powered versions, initially with just the 6, but the Hemi V8 may also return. Number 1. Kia Stinger. I included this one and made it my number 1 for one simple reason. I own a Kia Stinger, which I bought in 2022, and it is the first Kia I ever owned. But it'll also most likely be the last Kia I ever owned, since they'll probably never make something like this again. When Kia first started imports of the Stinger from South Korea to the US in 2017, it was the fastest car Kia ever offered. But it was also a Kia, which raised a lot of eyebrows.
Many people out there can't get past the fact that these are just a Kia because, Kias of old were just a bit crap.
Many question how good this could possibly be, coming from a company that once made the Festiva and Aspire for Ford back in the 80s and 90s, and sold the subcompact Rio in the same year the Stinger was introduced. Even the name Stinger was admittedly kind of goofy, so that probably made some not take it seriously. But then experts employed by several car magazines got behind the wheel, and it far surpassed their expectations. It wasn't just a 4-door sedan, but instead a 5-door hatchback, a rare option nowadays, and the primary reason I wanted to get one, although the twin-turbo V6 didn't hurt either. But although it got advertised by automotive publications, it had little to no mainstream advertising, so few in the general public knew it existed. Being a low-slung sedan and not a crossover hurt its chances too, although Kia did a far better job of advertising their other sedans, like the Forte and Optima, and later their replacements, the K4 and K5. Averaging around 18,000 sales per year, Kia basically ignored it, leading to its end in 2023. Despite that, my local Kia dealer keeps asking me if I want to sell it back to them, and the answer to that, at least for now, is no. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click the like button and subscribe to my channel. If you once owned a car from the 70s to mid-2000s that you rarely see today, and would like it featured in a future episode, leave a reply in the comments or contact me at the email shown here. See you next time.
It's basically like a Dodge Charger Hellcat went out to a bar. It got hammered. It brought home a Toyota Prius. They made love. And 9 months later, the Dodge Charger EV was born in all its glory.